Hey everybody. So for today's movie review, I'm going to talk about the Richard Linklater sequel, which was Before Sunset. It was the sequel to Before Sunrise. It came out 9 years after Before Sunrise. So I believe this came out in 2004. So that would have been 9 years after Before Sunrise. I think that one was 1995 when they filmed that. Um, so in this sequel, you guys, we follow Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy again as Celine and Jesse. If I got, yep, Celine and Jesse, and it's basically been 9 years since they last met. And this time, Jesse is now a writer who's wrote a big romance novel, and he basically used what was that night from part one and made like a fictionalized version of that, and became famous as this writer through this experience that he had, and as he wrote this story with fictional names and I think a few fictional places. He mentioned it in the beginning of the film, and so basically, he was busy writing. He got a wife over time. He has a child. You find out later on that Julie Delpy got married but didn't have kids. So they moved on with their lives. Even though Ethan Hawke was thinking they were going to follow through, meeting up earlier, several years, like they planned at the end of Before Sunrise. Because in Before Sunrise, they said we're going to meet up again in 6 months. Even though Ethan Hawke showed up, she did not, due to a funeral with her grandmother, I think she said. Um, so she had to attend that and couldn't make it, and she really thought that he wasn't going to make it. So basically, it was one of those things where one person was committed to the idea while the other one was not. Julie Delpy really think he wasn't going to be there, and like I said, she moved on. She actually got married to someone else. Um, and also with this film, you guys, it really didn't feel romantic. It really just felt like two people catching up on life, in their 30s, and just kind of finding out what they've been up to over all those years. Kind of found out, basically at the time, at the end of the first film, they really thought they were going to be this relationship. That didn't work out. And so they basically were catching up and basically kind of put the pieces together as to why that didn't work, and, the things that do work and things that didn't work with the current marriage that they have. And so basically, this is Ethan Hawke's opportunity to be with this woman again for the second time in his life, and he only gets to be with her until like 7:15 at night or something, because he has to fly out of Paris because he was pitching this book to several different places around the world, and I think he said that this was like his 12th place. Um, pitching this book and telling people what it's all about, and kind of like Q&A sessions where people ask him questions about the book and he tries to answer them as best as he can. Um, so basically, like the first film, he has a limited time to get to know this woman, just like, but she's actually not as limited, since she actually lives in Paris where they were at in this movie. I think they were in Vienna or something in the first film, and so she has all the time in the world, but he has a time limit that he has to get out of Paris for. Um, so it's basically a film where two people who were almost in a relationship get to catch up on their lives with each other. So Before Sunset, you guys, as far as the positives go, I kind of liked the whole turning 30 perspective of this film. I kind of like the idea of, these people 9 years later, they kind of reflect what they feel turning 30 is about, kind of their personal experience with it, what they like and don't like about it. Um, so that part was very interesting. I believe Richard Linklater, Ethan Hawke, and Julie Delpy were all a part of the script in this one, and not just Richard Linklater like the first film was. I think he did have a Kim Krzan. Yeah, I think she wrote um, some of the characters in the first film too, and so she came back for this one, I believe. And but yeah, I like the whole turning 30 perspective. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on the conversations they had throughout the film, and kind of how we get to see these characters age in some way. I liked the stock footage they used from part one to specifically near the beginning of the film, where Ethan Hawke was remembering the time he had with Celine in the first film, and kind of the things in his book kind of make him think about those events from the first film. So I thought that was a very clever way to incorporate, his flashbacks, kind of his experience, the way he viewed it, how that material made it into his book. So I thought that was a very interesting thing that Richard Linklater did at the beginning of the film. I like how the film recaps and revisits certain things from part one. They talk about reincarnation again. Some of the topics they talked about from part one appear a little bit in this film, but not for too long because there is a lot of things new that they cover in this one. Um, but for the most part, they did recap and revisit a lot of things they were talking about in the first film. Uh, they recapped and revisited kind of their experience of their time together in the first film and kind of how that affects them now and kind of the affects their current relationship and basically that experience, how that was both good and bad for the current marriage and relationships they had after that event from part one. Um, so I liked how they did that. I liked the good and bad memory reflections from part one. There was definitely a lot of scenes in here where uh, that night was a good time for them, and it was also it almost was kind of hurtful to their current marriages. Like there was times in the film where they kind of burst out crying or were upset. There was almost a time where the thing almost entirely broke up between the two, and that would have been the ending for the film. And because they really thought this relationship was going to work, and even in their current relationship, they're still thinking about each other and romantically, and so they really began to question if they really were in love with each other. I liked the shooting locations in this film. They shot in Paris in this one. Very beautiful scenery. I liked all the boat scenes that they were on when they were talking to each other on the boat, when they were talking in the city and everything. Um, so yeah, the shooting wise, it looked beautiful. They really found some great places to shoot at in this movie. Um, as far as the negatives go, you guys, I really did not think this film was as magical as part one. Part one was definitely a whole experience, kind of this one night experience that these two people had before they had to part for a very long time and just continue on with their lives. Part one was just the Before Sunrise was just an experience in itself, and I really don't think this film was quite that experience the way the first film was. Um, so I was let down as far as the magic of the first film transitioning into this film went. Um, just overall, not as good as part one. Just looking back on it, just reflecting on what I just saw. Um, yeah, it just didn't seem as magical and as fun and as entertaining and as romantic as the first film was, and I was kind of let down a little bit from that. Um, I didn't think the conversation topics were as interesting in this one. In the first film, they covered reincarnation and they covered, um, you know, like uh, like pure honest Q&As with each other. They just had more interesting stuff to talk about, I think, in the first film. In this film, they were just it was either I thought there were some scenes where they talked about Ethan Hawke's book for too long and kind of her reflection on the book, and that really didn't give them a lot of time because this was a very short movie. It was only an hour and 20 minutes. Um, to talk about other things. It went on for too long, and because of that, they really weren't able to cover a lot of more what could have been interesting stuff throughout the rest of the film. I felt this story was way too brief. It was a very quickly told story from what I experienced. It was just it felt like it didn't take them very long to film it, and it didn't feel like it just didn't feel complete. It felt like there was at least 20 minutes taken out of here, and there could have been there could have been a good another 20 to 30 minutes of this film, and I think it would have benefited a lot. I think they could have covered a lot more stuff. They could have covered the whole book thing and covered a lot more subject matters like the first film did for this one, and they really missed the opportunity with that. I thought. They're just one of the complaints I had about the first film, you guys, was that I thought Ethan Hawke's character wasn't very interesting, and though they did improve upon him a bit, they did mature the character a bit. They just didn't do enough to improve upon the character, and that was one thing in this film I really wanted to happen, and it didn't happen. Um, really wanted his character to be improved upon. Really wanted his character to be a more interesting person. I like how there was a more writer side to him, kind of some follow through from the first film where he was saying all these story ideas, and um, how that one night was really meant a lot to him, and so he did it through a book that he had a huge passion for, writing over time for, I think he said, 3 to 4 years. Um, but I think there could have been a lot more improvements to that character if they really went back to the script and did some really interesting things with him. The ending in this film I really didn't like at all. It was abrupt. It was poor. Um, it was just very quick. It didn't even feel like an ending. It just was very. It didn't end on a good note. I don't think. Um, you can even tell they were making a part three by the end of this film. It just did not feel complete. Um, and it almost gives you the misconception that that he stayed with her in that apartment, and it just really was not a good ending. I don't think. It just ended on a bad note. It made me just. I think that's what he even said in my inside my mind when the film ended. It's like, wow, that was the ending. So I did not like the ending of this film at all. But overall, guys, Before Sunset, I do give it an 8 out of 10. It is a good film. Doesn't even scratch the surface of the first film, I don't think, though. Um, it's worth experiencing. If you liked the first film, it's definitely worth experiencing if you love the first film. If you didn't like the first film, don't even bother. It's very subpar compared to the first film. Just really not. I really did not think this was as interesting as the first film. Like I said, I like the whole turning 30 perspective of the film, but it just I don't think they played around with it enough to tell you the truth. Um, so like I said, 8 out of 10, you guys. I liked it. I do want to see Before Midnight, which will be part three in this series. Um, I really hope they improve upon the mistakes that this film made, and I hope it doesn't feel really brief. Um, so they have a huge opportunity to make improve upon this one, and I really hope they do that with Before Midnight. But overall, like I said, if you liked Before Sunrise, this one is worth checking out, but don't expect to love it the way that you loved the first film. If you didn't like Before Sunrise, like I said, don't even bother watching this one. It's not even close to that. Um, but overall, it's a pretty good film, though, you guys.